And joining me now is the Senate Majority Whip Republican Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. Senator Barrasso, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Well, good morning and happy Mother's Day to you and to all the mothers who are watching today.
Thank you so much, Senator Barrasso. I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for being here. I do want to start on Ukraine. President Putin saying that he is interested in having direct talks with Ukraine later this week. Of course, that comes after President Trump and European leaders said that they want to see an unconditional 30-day ceasefire, and if not, threaten to impose sanctions. Do you believe that President Putin's offer is a rejection of President Trump's proposal, Senator?
Well, what we're seeing here is America's strength and leadership under President Trump, and it's so wonderful to see the European nations step up to join President Trump in this show of strength to Putin. The killing needs to stop, and I think the 30-day ceasefire is something that Putin needs to accept. Look, a long-standing peace in that part of the world between Ukraine and Russia that's verifiable is going to be good for Ukraine, Russia, Europe, and the United States. And we wouldn't be in this position if we'd had a strong leader previously. Joe Biden did nothing to deter Putin from invading and didn't give Ukraine the weapons that they needed when they needed them most. And the Senate is ready to stand behind President Trump with him. We have 70 senators who have committed in a bipartisan piece of legislation to really go after Russia in a punishing way with devastating sanctions on anybody who buys oil, gas, or uranium from Russia. 500% tariffs, and their number one and number two customers are China and India, but there are also countries in Europe who are buying energy from Russia. Putin understands strength, not statements. It's time to end the war.
All right, we'll see how that unfolds. It's obviously an incredibly dynamic situation. I do want to move on to another incredibly dynamic situation. Of course, these talks about tariffs. President Trump seemed optimistic about the ongoing trade talks with China. He called the tariff talks a, quote, total reset. Of course, his Treasury Secretary leading those talks with his Chinese counterpart. You've been incredibly supportive of President Trump's high tariffs against China. You said that they're a way to stand up to China. Senator, how confident are you that the U.S. can get a fair deal with China?
Well, first, there was the British announcement this week, and in Wyoming, where beef is such a big part of our economy, this was a big deal. We're all for it, and I think many other discussions with other countries are going to go into that. I'm happy to see President Trump standing up to China, and look, here we are a week after his interview with you, and we are actively engaged in negotiations with China. President Trump learned in his first term that you can't trust China. China's economy is weak. They need us, they need our markets, but it's been a one-way street. We need to make sure that their markets are open to us. What we have seen during COVID is that we were dangerously dependent on China for critical minerals, critical medicines. We said never again can we allow that to happen. We know that China has taken advantage of the United States, probably taken more jobs and money from us by stealing our trade secrets than all other countries combined. They use it to get stronger as a nation, to spy on us. I think President Trump is doing the right thing, standing up for American workers and American jobs.
Let me ask you about some of the messaging, though, because as you know, tariffs have already started to increase prices on some goods, including car seats, strollers, work tools. I want you to listen to a part of my interview with President Trump when he talked about what this could mean for supplies. Take a listen.
I'm just saying they don't need to have $30. They can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
Senator, what do you say to people who hear those words and feel like the president is telling them to ration their goods?
Well, the president, I think, is very effective at using the bully pulpit, and he is using it, I think, to show strength and leadership of America. A week ago, you would have never foreseen the discussions going on in Switzerland this week between our trade representative, our Secretary of Treasury, and China. We wouldn't have foreseen the deal with Great Britain. We wouldn't have seen the call for the ceasefire and Putin agreeing to have peace talks. The president is very effective at using the bully pulpit. And I've been traveling around Wyoming, been in 4 communities this weekend.
Yeah.
What people are concerned about here at home is, and they're happy about, is that the price of gasoline is 50 cents cheaper a gallon now than it was at graduation time last year, $10 cheaper to fill up the truck. That's what the American people are concerned about, their own pocketbooks.
Well, I know you're talking about lower prices. During the Biden administration, you expressed real concerns that prices had increased at stores like the Dollar Tree, for example, which you talked about how important a store like that is to Wyoming, to rural communities in particular. And now the Dollar Tree says that the tariffs could actually push them to raise prices again and that they may not be able to stock some of their goods. What do you say, Senator, to the people of Wyoming who hear that, who rely on stores like the Dollar Store, and they're worried?
Well, I travel around Wyoming. People in Wyoming are very happy with the president and what he's doing to help our economy. Tariffs are just one tool as part of our comprehensive economic plan. We're trying to get that passed in the very near future in Congress, focused on both the safety and the prosperity of the American people. We are focused on lowering prices, raising wages, and bringing jobs back to America. And that's our focus right now in Congress.
Well, you took me exactly to my next question, because I want to talk about the president's tax bill. In order to get some of the savings needed to pass it, President Trump floated the idea of increasing taxes on the highest income earners, those making more than $2.5 million. He also acknowledged the politics are quite thorny. But, Senator, would you support that, increasing taxes on the highest income earners?
Well, I'm a conservative, and I don't want to increase taxes on anybody. What you do know is that the Democrats, if we don't get this bill passed, they're going to raise taxes by $4 trillion on the American people. It will hit every working family in America with higher taxes. And, you know, 84% of Americans don't like what the Democrats are proposing. Our goal is to keep more money in people's pockets so they can go to the store, pay their rent, save for retirement. That's what our focus is.
Senator,
lower costs and higher wages.
Just to be very clear, yes or no, you are not ruling out the possibility of increasing taxes on the highest income earners?
I oppose raising taxes on anyone, and the Democrats want to raise $4 trillion in taxes on everyone.
Do you rule it out?
I am against raising taxes on anyone. We're working the bill through the process. It's going through the House. We're ironing out the details right now. We're going to get a bill passed and signed by the president that's going to put more money in people's pockets and give them the certainty that taxes aren't going to go up.
All right. Finally, Senator, I want to talk about something that one of President Trump's top aides, Stephen Miller, said this week. He said the administration is actively looking at suspending habeas corpus. Just for our audience, that's the right to challenge a person's detention by the government. This would be a part of the broader efforts to speed up their deportation policies. The Constitution says that habeas corpus may not be suspended, quote, unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion. Would you vote to suspend habeas corpus, since the power does ultimately lie with Congress?
The president has said he will follow the law. The president says if he disagrees with the law, that he will appeal those things. The president was elected, and he won every one of the battleground states on promising to secure the border and bring safety back to our communities. That's exactly what he is doing. People do not want to live with MS-13 gang members in their communities. The Democrats lost the election because they opened the borders to 10 million illegal immigrants, including members of criminal cartels, drug dealers, gang members. That's what the election was about. And the president has now seen judges, district judges, radical district judges, using their courts to set national standards on making it harder for the president to deport individuals, criminals, and I stand with the president.
And yet, Senator, just to put a fine point on this, I want to know what you would do. Would you vote to suspend habeas corpus if this were brought before Congress? Ultimately, this power lies with Congress.
The president said he is going to follow the law. He was on with you last week. He said he has great respect for the Supreme Court. He said he expects the Attorney General to do the right thing, and I expect that the president will.
Can you just give me a yes or no what you would do, though? Would you support suspending habeas corpus?
I don't believe this is going to come to Congress.
Okay.
What I believe is the president is going to follow the law. He has said it repeatedly.
Senator Barrasso, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it and appreciate your Mother's Day wishes as well. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you. And when we come back...
You too.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.